Hi everyone, this is Dragon GGY. This is the Operator Hindsight for Thorns the Lodestar. There are a lot to cover, so buckle up. Thorns the Lodestar is a 6-star alchemist in the Specialist class. Trait of the Archetype can throw alchemical units to assist in combat. This is a very new archetype, and as you can see, they have a wide but short attack range, which is rather unique. Let's start with analyzing their stats build. This is a physically fragile archetype, merely beyond 1000 HP and 100 defense. On the other hand though, they have very high resistance. Thorns starts with 30 base, which is on par with Ambushes, but then they also have resistance as part of their potential growth. So Tin Man gets 8 resistance from it, and for Thorns it's 12 resistance, totaling up to 42 resistance. That said, given the low max HP, really wouldn't say tanking arts damage is a viable use, just know that he's okay against them. Their attack interval is 1.5 seconds, which is relatively long already in Specialist. Only Hook Masters and Ambushes are above them. They're also relatively expensive at 18 DP base, so it's only cheaper than Ambushes. Now, what do they actually do? Judging from the 2 alchemists that we have so far, they seem to be buff and debuff providers. Many say that they seem to belong more in the supporter class, and I kinda agree. Let's focus on some key characteristics. First, all of their skills use a snapshot mechanic. What it means is that the effect of the skills are only dependent on the related stats at the moment of casting, aka throwing out the alchemical unit, and will stay fixed for its duration. So if you have a Spinnic series relic and get the attack increase on cast, that alchemical unit is gonna stick with that attack stat. Be it attack up or attack down afterwards, it's gonna stay at the exact same number when you throw it out, which is very good most of the time. Alchemical units will continue to exist even when the user has left the field. They function completely independently from the operators, and for that reason, if you have SP batteries or they just cycle fast enough, their effects are always stackable, with one exception in Thorns' skill 3. And since they are independent, obviously their damage is not sourced from the operator themselves, which can help avoid some ricochet damage. And finally, all their skills are also instant, meaning that barring a short SP lockout, they start to recycle right after use. So all of these mechanics are actually very good. They mean good cycling, great buff candidate. Let's see how Thorns do with this. Talent 1, attack plus 10%, 14% at potential 5. When there are other operators in range, alchemical units thrown lasts 3 seconds longer, 4 seconds at potential 5. First of all, attack modifier increase is good. It seems ordinary, yes, but because like we said, all their skills are snapshot and instant, and all their skills involve attack scales similar to Sword Masters, so the benefit from a stable attack modifier is considerable. Alchemical unit duration is also a nice addition. It's basically increased to their skill uptime. This talent is especially significant for skill 1 and skill 2, which has shorter cycles. It's also crucial for giving skill 3 more duration and damage, since its effects are backloaded and you would want it to stay at its peak a little bit longer. All in all, when you play with him, you should always look to trigger this talent. By how the skills work, it's mainly skill 2 that we're talking about. Be sure not to leave him dry, that's all. Talent 2, when deployed, all allies, not just operators, have attack speed plus 5, and all enemies have attack speed minus 5. Effect is doubled for allies and enemies on a straight line of 6 or more consecutive ground tiles. To be more specific though, it's 6 consecutive passable ground tile in a straight line, so if a fence is in the way, then it doesn't count. Range tiles obviously don't count either, but ground tiles that are undeployable or are banned from deploying but are passable would be considered valid for the skill. Surprisingly, holes are also considered viable for this talent. Tiles where this talent is effective will be visualized by a scanning wave FX as Thorns deploy. Very cool. You can also find some special terrains that surprisingly would be considered ground tiles by this talent, like water, artificial high grounds in certain maps, etc. This talent is in line with the buff and debuff function of Thorns and affects the entire battlefield. Unfortunately, it's highly terrain dependent, so the double effect is more like a little surprise when it's effective. It's more likely that you don't notice it much. The double effect is also not possible for ranged operators by how it works. Thorns' module is estimated to be out in about 3 months, on the same patch of Necros' release. Trade update: when an alchemical unit is on the field, SP recovery plus 0.1 per second. Update to Talent 1, attack now further increased by 5% at level 3, and the duration is further extended by 1 second at level 2. For the base effect, like we said, all alchemist skills are instant, meaning that most of the time their SP is growing. So SP recovery rate increase has great coverage, and the requirement is easy to meet as well. Again, it works with skill 1 and skill 2 best since they have very high uptime. The extra 1 second duration at level 2 is again more significant on skill 1 and skill 2 because they last shorter to start with, and more duration means more SP recovery increase, goes hand in hand with the base effect. Level 3 for higher attack percentage may seem small, but still a moderate damage and healing increase due to the attack scaling skills. So in summary, I'd say this module is more of a QOL to his daily experience given its impact on skill 1 and skill 2. You can now have 2 stacks of skill 1 consistently, and you can have 100% of skill 2 uptime beyond potential 5. Don't worry if you don't have the potential, you are only getting a few frames of gap. So I can confirm that the improvement is still great without potential 5. The module increases all the DPS or HPS from his skills by 14.03%. For skill 3 though, the improvement brought by this module to its use experience is minimal. It makes the whole 60-second cycle faster by just 2.8 seconds and 1 more second to the support and damage, which is not that game changing. So my final recommendation would be level 2+. The main QOL is the base effect plus the extra second, and level 3 for slightly more damage and healing. It's a positive improvement for using him in daily, makes the cycle smoother, but for his supposed ceiling and signature skill 3, not a big change. For skill recommendation, my take is skill 2 over skill 3 or skill 1 at the moment. Skill 2 is a healing, arts DOT, and anti-healing 3-in-1 skill with an enormous range, and is able to cover areas way beyond himself. Also comes with decent coverage. Most applicable in daily, very good in RA as well, but it's the complete opposite of an AFK skill. Skill 3 is a debuff and damage hybrid with a dot kinetic mechanic that I think 80% of you don't want to meddle with. Its effectiveness is decent but comes with extremely clunky activation, and thus it has a relatively long downtime. Thorns as an alchemist is not doing anything without his skill on the field, so despite its on-paper potential, it's a skill that you may find yourself struggling to utilize. Skill 1 is an AFK healing skill that can sustain amity units consistently and toughen up allies in the effect range against physical damage. It sounds cool as an idea, but how it's applied actually places some restriction as to where everyone is positioned. So besides keeping some amity units alive, it's not that competitive with the standard healing skills that you currently have. Skill 1 throws an alchemical unit at an ally, and for 8 seconds this targeted ally and other allies in the 8 surrounding tiles gain defense plus 100 and recover HP equal to 20% of Thorns attack per second. This is a 5/5 auto skill. The stats below give HPS when you have 2 stacks at the same time, which is the optimal result of using this skill. Without module, you're looking at a 1 to 2 second gap where there's only 1 stack available, but with module, you should get just 0.1 second to no gap. Now, for the mechanics, the healing provided by this skill is in the form of HP recovery, and the skill also made it clear that it can target allies, so that'll include both operators and summons. By summons, we're talking about the ones that can be targeted, so it doesn't include equipment type summons like Typewriter, Sandbeast. It doesn't include map equipment either. It will prioritize targets with the lowest HP percentage before deployment order, and will still use the skill when everyone in range is full HP. Given that, here's a tip that you may miss. Do not deploy Thorns last if you want to preemptively prep a target that is not himself with the defense boost, because doing so will make him prioritize using the skill on himself when everyone is full HP, and only throw the alchemical unit at your intended target when they take damage. Like we touched on, due to the existence of a 1.5 second SP lockout, there will be a short gap where only 1 stack is effective without module, and module level 2 narrows that gap to close to nothing. With some SP buffs like Force Sway, you can get 2 to 3 seconds of 3 stacks available, so that's up to you. Now, for its support functions, it's 200 flat defense increase and about 280 HPS. So against physical damage, it's effectively 480 HPS, in most cases, not always. Flat defense increase is a direct addition to the base stats like Shining's Talent 1, so it's more effective on units with high defense modifiers, like Defenders. Now, pros about this skill. Number 1, AoE healing. Not multi-target, it's AoE in a 9 tile range. 2 is the skill that can heal enmity units with great consistency. It can even directly target enmity units, unlike medics. 3, it's a constant flow of smooth healing, so under the same HPS, it's slightly more reliable. Also, if the defense increase manages to surpass enemies' DPH breakpoint, it will yield more benefit than on-paper numbers. For cons, well, unlike standard medics, he has a shorter range, so he can't stay too far away from his target, while he himself is a vulnerable squishy. Now, you may say that it's the same range as multi-target medics, so it isn't that bad, right? Well, he's also doing an area healing, meaning that units that requires healing shouldn't be on different sides of his range. Remember we said having 2 stacks is essential for the effectiveness. If you spread them out, chances are that both sides end up having not enough healing. Whereas for multi-target healers, it doesn't really matter where their targets are in the range. So it's more about short range plus the area healing gimmick, which kind of makes the tiles to the sides less meaningful. And finally, the base HPS isn't super standout, more so when against non-physical damage. Balancing the pros and cons, you'll realize that it eventually comes down to just healing enmity units for application. Adds in the defense bonus and being AFK while you're at it. My nominees for healing targets are Patterns and Reapers. As operators, Intellicia in 2 months can use that. For summons, keeping Wizardel's Revenant Shadows up isn't that bad. They are probably one of the best and most daily relevant summons anyways. The summons from Ling and the Cross can use it too. And I'm highlighting the Cross as a preview here. Basically, the skill 3 summon from the Cross has a stats build-up mechanic to it. The base form of this summon already has a tougher stat from the normal ones in form of a 100% defense modifier, and for every level it gets, it receives a further 40% defense increase up to 6 stacks, so that is in total 340% defense increase. Now, if Thorns give 200 defense to units without a further modifier, that will be 200 defense. But the same 200 defense flat increase to this summon ends up being a 880 defense increase for the final result. In fact, this is one of the best highlights for Thorns skill 1. Many consider the Thorns skill 1 plus Necross skill 3 combo as an alternative to Gladia plus OPN skill 2. Before we move on, as a honorable mention, I want to bring up Crushers as potential targets. They do want that defense. Thorns skill 1 plus OPN skill 2 can also work. Maybe you can try Holder skill 1, just know that the base effect of Crushers getting 20% more healing does not work with this skill, because HP recovery is not healing, which is a little bit unfortunate. Skill 2 throws an alchemical unit, and for 15 seconds ground enemies in the area effect receives 50% less healing and HP recovery effect, and takes 180% of attack as Arch DOT. Allies within the area recover HP equal 18% of attack per second. The alchemical unit will slowly travel in the direction it was thrown and expands its area of effect over 15 seconds. Can store 2 charges. This is a 14/20 manual skill. The HPS of this skill is 126.6 and the Arch DOT is tenfold at 1265.9. With module and potential 5+, you can have 100% uptime if you click the skill in time. Without potential 5, you have a small gap, which isn't that bad in practice. Now let's quickly go over some details first. If there's enemy in range, Thorns will throw the skill at the center of the tile that they are in. If not, he'll then throw it to the center of the direct frontmost tile to himself, like indicated in the diagram here. So the alchemical unit always starts at the center of a tile. The initial radius of the area is 1.1 tile. The radius linearly grows by 0.143 tile per second and moves at 0.1 tile per second. The duration where the unit will execute this expansion and movement behavior is as specified in the skill. 15 seconds. For the extended duration from talent 1, the unit will instead just stay at its final size and location. It's always moving away from Thorns as well. All the effects from the skill are also stackable. The DOT from 2 different units are calculated independently as expected. Same goes for the HP recovery. The healing and recovery reduction, which I'll just summarize as anti-healing effect on enemies, are also stacked multiplicatively, so 2 stacks means 75% reduction instead of 100%. The key standout point for this skill is definitely the great coverage and the enormous range. We've addressed the cycle time already, so if you want even faster cycle to make up for the potential, or you want some 2-stack uptime, I recommend working with Forsway and Telopsis again. Of course, you can opt to save up 2 stack for better effectiveness in key waves. Now for range, the max radius is 3.245 tiles, covering up to about 38 tiles on the battlefield and can reach up to 7+ tiles away from Thorns. So the alchemical unit can easily cover more than half of the field and reach enemies or equipment way beyond your whole defense line. This is most iconic in episode 13, where you can push the bomb from a distance. Now, there are some gimmicks about this range. If you run a simulation, you'll see that if the unit is thrown in the default way 2 tiles in front of Thorns, he will be outside of the area of effect from start to finish. However, in practice, this only happens if the landing tile is a ranged tile. If it's a ground tile instead, he will be able to get the healing in the last second of the standard duration. This phenomena has something to do with the Z-axis in the game, which means if you somehow is able to place him on a ground tile, then letting it land on a ranged tile also works. So if possible, a pro tip here would be try to position him to create a height difference between his own position and that 2 tile in front of him. Not a mandatory procedure though, in my opinion. But as a result, unless you throw the units sideways to make them go to the sides, allies that are positioned sideways to Thorns are indeed not that likely to get the HP recovery reliably, and sometimes if the alchemical unit happen to move sideways, they may just slowly slide out of the map or go to unintended directions. So definitely look out for timings when you cast the skill. That will be pro tip number 2. Next, let's focus on what the skill does. It has 3 main functions. Number 1, healing, or precisely speaking, HP recovery like skill 1. Again, it can heal enmity units, but the HPS isn't that standout like the 2 stack from skill 1. It's 126.6 post module, and for reference, Skadi Alter skill 2 has 112 HPS. So imagine he throws Skadi's Seaborn but with a greater range, coverage, and uptime. It can help to sustain allies when it isn't super intensive and you don't want to put down an extra medic for that. Now for damage, 1.2k DPS is usually around the level of AFK skills, and this skill is certainly not AFK, but considering its super high coverage, stackable for double the number, and being a massive AoE death pool, I'll still say it's at least respectable, certainly so in daily. And given the attack scaling nature of skills, throwing in attack buffs brings significant damage increase. Top recommendation is certainly Skadi Alter skill 2 for daily convenience, and that is 47.9% increase to both his HPS and DPS. I would recommend using this skill with Thorns at a choke point defending with block units. That way he's more in control of where the alchemical unit is landing and thus where they're going. If you use it on a crossroad instead, there's a high chance that enemies may outrun the area of effect. This skill is oppressive against mob waves or damage instance-based enemies. It's effective at damaging AFK enemies that are far away with a minimum dependence on placement and tile availability. Now lastly, for the anti-healing effect. First, you should know that this doesn't affect enemies reviving between phases. The actual effect is okay, it's more that currently anti-healing is not even close to mandatory as a solution to self-sustaining enemies or gimmicks in this game. So from my perspective, it's more of a little surprise when it's effective instead of the main selling point. Typical examples for countermeasures are Mephisto, possessed enemies who regens health, and specific enemies like the Sarkaz Bone Guard in chapter 13. There are definitely more though, which I will say a bit more later. For applications, it's just overall your best choice in daily. The defining advantage is the range plus AoE. There are a handful of gimmicks or stages and enemies that attempts to limit operators' effective range, and this skill is also kinda an answer to that. I'll save the examples for summary. Unfortunately, it is a rather labor-intensive skill. Button press every 20 seconds. Whether or not that's a problem is on you. I want to highlight its performance in RA in particular. True AoE damage and big range is satisfying to use against mob waves or mining in the game mode. The damage is non-traceable, so Thorns don't die from damage reflections. There are these locked rock gates that you can only damage when you're next to it or by using splash damage. They are also unlockable with Thorns' skill too, using certain equipment to draw his attack of course. And although there are like only 5 people who cares, but he had in solo 1-act full collection record on the map Mineshaft Crawl. It's more about being able to unlock multiple gates in one deployment though. He also benefits from food, or is it called provisions, that reduces the SP requirement, where he can spam the skill in combination with charging stations to stack multiple alchemical units where the floor becomes lava. Skill 3 passive effect, attack range increases into a flinger range. On activation, throws alchemical units at 4 operators with the lowest block count. For 23 seconds, enemies within the defined area have attack minus 15%, defense minus 35%, and resistance minus 35%. Does not stack. And also take 210% of attack as art damage per second. These effects gradually increase and reach max values of attack minus 30%, defense minus 50%, resistance minus 50%, and 390% of attack as damage after 15 seconds. This is a 48/60 manual skill. Art's DPS starts at 1477 and peaks at 2743. Total damage is 66k, so that'll average down to about 2.3k DPS for its duration, which is 28 seconds post-module with a 58.7 second cycle. So with such a text wall skill, you know we're expecting some complicated mechanics. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Briefly speaking, the skill revolves around connecting dots. You're using operators as dots to weave a web and generate a customized area of effect. Do note that in this case, you can only use operators as the dots, not summons. It will prioritize operators with the lowest block count before considering deploy order, and Thorns himself can also be a dot for connecting the area. The skill can be used when there are less operators in range than the number specified in skill, which is 4. So if there are 3, a triangle should be formed, 2 for a line, and if there's only himself, then it will end up being just a single point where he's at. To make the result more humanized, there are some hidden QoL features for how it works. Number 1, it will not form a tetragon with an interior angle beyond 180 degrees. Instead, it will automatically ignore a point that makes the angle and form a triangle instead, as shown in this diagram, to maximize the final area. Likewise, if multiple operators are in the same line, it will ignore the ones in between and form a line with only the ones on both sides. Basically, the skill always attempts to make an area as big as possible. Now, marking the area is one thing, its hitbox is another. There are special rules depending on the result. When there's only a single point available, then the point is the hitbox, which is basically nothing. For a straight line, the actual hitbox is the same line but with a 0.65 width to it. And finally, for an enclosed shape, either a triangle or a tetragon, it's the shape but with all sides being pushed outward by an extra 0.325. So all these settings are there to make the effect registration a bit more user-friendly. And an extra QoL is that when an allied unit is within the hitbox, enemies blocked by this unit will be considered in the hitbox and gets affected. This is important, just imagine if it doesn't. This also means that even when the area effect is just 1 point, if you place a unit on it, targets blocked by this unit will take the skill effect. Before application, I want to talk limitations first, and there are a lot of them. 1. This skill is one of the most complicated skills to use in this game, at least when you want the full potential out of it. That is, if you want a bigger range to take advantage of its AoE nature, you have to go through extensive setups by deploying multiple operators scattered around. That will mean dedicating up to 4 deployment slots while perhaps making some risky positioning. Sometimes it may even be further limited by terrain conditions. Next big problem is the lack of crowd control. The strength of Suzerain comes from the fact that her crowd control provides damage window alongside buffs. Thorns, on the other hand, has 0 CC in his kit, so he's almost always paired with extra CC providers or block units, which further limits the tactical choices he had when combined with the web weaving part. The skill comes with attack and defense debuff alongside resistance. There's also a skill that does similar things, Shaman skill 2. That skill has crazy good ease of use and effectiveness compared to this skill. Considering that Thorns is doing arts damage himself, you just hardly find time where all 3 debuffs are crucial at the same time. Not really a major downside, but think of if we can leave out these parts to bargain for better ease of use or something like that. And finally, long downtime. Even when alchemists are notoriously known for their super high skill coverage, this skill still ends up with about 30 seconds of downtime after the units have expired. Now, on paper, 30 seconds isn't that bad, but evaluating downtime needs to take what operators do off skill into consideration. We said 25 seconds downtime for Viviana is still a bit too much because she's not lane holding efficiently without her skills. At the same time, you may feel the 50-second downtime for Wizardel skill 3 isn't that bad, because she's still wrecking everything that doesn't fly off skill. For Thorns, Alchemist does approximately 0 thing without the alchemical units on the field. That's why people still tend to retreat him immediately after cast. Doing that is absolutely fine, it just makes this skill even less appealing for more general contents. Now let's talk applications. Alchemical units are independent of the operators that are targeted as their landing spots, so you can retreat them, including Thorns himself. The area effect will persist, and like we said, it's a common approach when using this skill. Damage from this skill is stackable if you somehow made multiple uses possible in a short period of time. The debuff effects unfortunately don't stack, and only the highest value is effective. The overall damage is 66.7k over 28 seconds, average DPS at 2381. A close comparison is Eyjafjalla's skill 3, who we also usually just retreat after skill use. Thorns does do higher total damage and has higher damage quality due to resistance shred, but comes with lower DPS. Overall, as a support character, this number is certainly great, especially when compared to similar characters like Gnosis or Virtuosa. If you really want more damage out of it, remember we said all their skills are attack scaling, so he takes buffs very well. Throw in Wolverine skill 2, Scar the Altar skill 3, or Silverlight Eterna skill 2, Stainless skill 1, all the good stuff. The timing is also very forgiving thanks to the snapshot mechanic, so it's more about if you are willing to go through all the extensive setup. For combos that help with using this skill, first of all, you usually want fast redeploy units to help with weaving the web, or you can go with ambushers and liberators. They make the dot connecting process easier. Next, we have damage enablers, preferably they pack crowd control and extra buffs together. Typical examples are Suzerain, Ascalon, Saria with her skill 3, etc. Be mindful that Saria is a block 3 unit and may not be prioritized. It can also be characters that buff Thorns himself to make the arts DOT deadlier. And finally, the actual main damage dealer in this setup. Given that the unique feature of this skill is a high resistance shred, it calls for arts damage a bit more, like Logos. Or you can go with physical and arts hybrid characters that benefit from both of the major debuffs. However, we don't really have a lot of these characters in the game. Ascalon is one of the examples, and she actually fits in all 3 of these roles we just mentioned. Finally, where do we use this skill? Obviously, you would try to fit him in extensive arts damage setups, like becoming the 4th member in the Suzerain Qiubai Logos combo. In daily, you can also opt to go for smaller area of effect, just enough to cover a choke point, or even just a line between him and a defender. It's not what this skill is designed to be, but given the complexity using this skill, it's one of the way to improvise. In summary, Thorns the Lodestar is a 6-star alchemist that packs a buff-debuff damage 3-in-1. There are a good variety of functions in his kit, but most of them just ended up not being impactful enough for players to develop strategies around him. So in the end, skill 2 becomes the most adopted skill for its AoE damage in a massive range, which has very little to do with the support side of him. Skill 3 also feels like a missed opportunity, with decent damage and debuff capability, but severely compromised by its terrible ease of use and the lack of crowd control, which are important tickets to both daily and advanced applications. That said, his AoE DOT damage in the big range still found application in the command event. There are damage instance-based enemies or gimmicks, which is found in the coming CNY event and the Global's 2B Autumn Celebration the Laterano 3.0. There are also gimmicks that limits the viable range of characters in the Crisis event 3 months later, and Skill 2 is also able to somewhat bypass that. Like we analyzed, he's also a QOL character in RA for farming big hordes as well as mining. Using skill 1, you can improve the experience playing with MT characters in daily. There are also applications for his anti-healing, although not mandatory. For example, the Gramophone boss in the current stationary security service, and later in the Laterano 3.0 event in one of the S stages. For impact rating, I'm rating him 6 for daily. Skill 1 and 2 are the ones for this context. Skill 1 provides consistent HP recovery and is AFK. Skill 2 has great uptime but requires quite a manual labor. Skill 1 is the skill for consistent and effective MT healing, but to make it work as intended, there are some hidden limitations on placement and order that you need to look out for. Skill 2 is great with its range and AoE nature, just look out for cast timings. For advanced, I'm closing out with 5, which is honestly heartbreaking for a supposedly support-based operator. Obviously, skill 3 is the skill that has the potential for buff game modes like IS. Physical damage scales better than arts damage due to how it's calculated, so usually we don't set up extensive combos for the physical dealers. Whether or not we need support characters in IS depend heavily on the current theme. In relic-rich themes like IS5, the reliance on support characters are rather low, and we tend to pick lower rarity ones that gets the job done. In my opinion, Thorns is quite similar to Ela in terms of design concepts, a support with considerable damage. However, Ela comes with supreme ease of use and great crowd control, both of which Thorns doesn't have. So although Thorns can have both damage and debuff effective, as opposed to Ela who predominantly uses her mines for full map support instead of doing damage herself in advanced contents, he's much less impactful in those situations. And it really doesn't go any better in CC, not mentioning that the mode always have deployment slot limits and terrain constraints that make it even harder to utilize this skill. Overall, the debuff in itself is okay, but everything else about it is making his life a lot harder. For pool analysis, I guess good news for daily focused players, Thorns is now more casual content favored despite being a support-based character, which is kinda rare, but his potential for advanced content has yet to find any applications. Gameplay-wise, I again have to highlight his range and AoE advantage. Range and AoE are very powerful edges in Arknights, and both something that newer players may lack, so he is surprisingly a newbie-friendly operator when you use his skill 2, in E1. But if you look at the damage purely, it's not outstanding by any means, so it may not turn out as appealing to players with other great arts damage belt, especially the more AFK-friendly ones. For schedule and meta, unfortunately, he just doesn't feel any irreplaceable roles post his release. The attack and defense debuff part to his skill 3 did not outcompete Shamale, a 5-year-old 5-star character. The upcoming Burn Enabler Yu also provides resistance shred in the form of Burn Burst. Yes, it's just a 20 flat decrease, which is less than what Thorns can offer beyond 40 resistance, but trade-off. The Burn team has better ease of use and wider combo options. Thorns gets to keep his theoretical skill ceiling, but when and where it's needed is unknown yet. The soon-to-be CCP3 also sees Ifrit's skill 3 as the resistance shred option instead of Thorns. Reasons include shorter downtime, the lack of extra deployment slots, and available tile to weave the web, and since we're gonna need crowd control anyways, it doesn't matter if Ifrit has a even narrower range, she's needed for her even higher resistance shred. And a very sad fact for Thorns, somewhat ironic, also the biggest reason he's not chosen, is that his defense shred in the package is actually an anti-synergy with KOB, who is the main damage dealer in the CCB, and of course the other two before. That's gonna be it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. Again, I want to stress that the ratings you see here are the ticks at the moment. Ratings can also change due to the recent trend of stage designs, most notably the current IS theme. IS-5 is coming to an end soon in CN. Depending on the actual environment of IS-6, there may be small or big changes coming up. For example, IS-5 is a high attack speed playground. Operators that don't benefit from attack speed are just objectively less competitive. From the sneak peek we got about IS-6, it may be crawling with damage-instance-based enemies, so I don't know, maybe characters like Thorns or even Antalicia can have their time to shine. Anyways, that's all from me. This episode has gotten awfully long. Hope you got something out of it, and see you in another video. Bye bye.